And before we begin, I'd like to introduce our speakers formally. And the bio they gave me is not short, and that's because their careers are extensive, so I'll try my best to be short. So Christian Camacho is a New York City-based architect and educator of Ecuadorian Bolivian descent. He receives his associate's degree in architectural technology from City Tech, B.Arch from the City College, and MSAAD from Columbia University. Christian's professional experience spans institutional, residential, and commercial projects with a focus on formal rigor and context-driven design solutions. He has practiced at several notable firms, including Alvaro Siza, Paycoat Fried and Partners, Asymptote Architecture, System Architects, and currently works at Smith Miller Hawkinson Architects. He has taught various courses over the past decade as an adjunct assistant professor at City Tech, and most recently as a visiting assistant professor at the New York Institute of Technology. Christian integrates his professional experience directly into his academic teaching, leading courses in design studios, professional practice, building systems, structural systems, and environmental systems. Demir Purisic, right here, is a New York-based licensed architect, educator, and researcher. In his professional career, Demir has worked on projects across a wide spectrum of typologies, including local art and cultural institutions, mixed-use developments and experimental design builds, residential and commercial renovations. Recent work includes the transformation of a 10,000 square foot industrial site into a hybrid cultural complex, housing a gallery, performance space, recording studio, and a cafe in the heart of Brooklyn. Prior to founding Studio Purisic, Demir worked at international offices such as Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, and OMA, AMO. And at SOM, he contributed to large-scale urban towers, adaptive reuse projects, and transit infrastructure. Prior to SOM, Demir worked at OMA, where he was involved in the research and execution of Countryside, the Future, a collaboration with Rem Koolhaas that culminated in a major exhibition at the Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum. His work for that show included a drone film documentary traversing 1,000 miles of the American Midwest to research automation in agriculture. Demir's independent and collaborative projects have been exhibited at the Guggenheim Museum in New York, DeWitt Center for Contemporary Art in Rotterdam, and the Harvard Graduate School of Design. His writing and design research have appeared in Countryside, A Report, Live Feed, and Still Life by Harvard GSD. He is also active in architectural education, teaching studios and seminars at City College of New York, New York City College of Technology, and the New York Institute of Technology. His pedagogical work spans design foundations, visual studies, systems thinking, and environmental technologies. He has participated in reviews and critiques at institutions including Pratt, Harvard, Yale, and the University of Colorado, Denver. Okay, third, thank you for your patience. Justin Sherman is a licensed architect in New York, New Jersey, and Florida. A member of the AIA, and currently a principal and partner with JFA in Brooklyn. With over 20 years of architectural experience, he has developed a diverse portfolio, previously working as an associate at prominent firms such as SOM and ILA. His experience spans a wide array of domestic and international projects, including mixed-use hotel, office, and laboratory towers, an embassy, and notable transportation hubs. Justin has the majority of his extensive experience in New York City, residential projects of all types and sizes, from low-rises to skyscrapers, from inclusionary housing to luxury condominiums. Additionally, his New York City expertise encompasses educational and hospitality projects such as public schools, private colleges, and boutique hotels. For nearly 2 decades, Justin has also shared his knowledge as an adjunct lecturer, professor at New York City College of Technology, which is also his alma mater. He also attended Northeastern for undergraduate studies and completed his master's degree in the architecture at the Boston Architectural College in Boston. Justin also shared a quote, so I'll let him read it after his presentation. It's a pretty nice quote. So, yeah, that was the introduction. So, why don't we welcome them with a big applause. And then we can start the lecture starting with Christian Camacho. Do you just want to stand here and
Sure,
do your
yeah,
presentation?
I'll You have the clicker?
On the side. Yeah. Let's check this. Okay. Hello, can you hear me? Yeah. All right. Thanks, Professor Park, for having us, inviting me. Really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for coming. I really appreciate you taking the time to come here and watch our presentations. There's something that I want to kind of make clear about this presentation. It's actually catered obviously for students, but I think it's more so catered for the first year and second year students maybe. I think those people are going to be the people that benefit the most from this. The arc of the presentation, just to kind of briefly go through it, I'm going to start with the genesis, my own genesis, and then I'll sort of go into the projects that I did in this school when I was here, some exercises you might recognize. And then I'll briefly go through my professional work. I'm not actually going to spend that much time on that. So I think the interesting thing about architecture is that it's a very human endeavor, and the thing that's important, I think, are our experiences that we have through architecture, especially in our early career and even our earlier moments in life. And I wanted to share a few of my early moments that sort of formed or helped me to think about architecture later on. And one of the earliest memories that I have of was sort of a spatial experience, if you will, was when I went to the World Trade Center for the first time. And I was probably about 10 years old, and my parents took me there, and it was a very different experience. Like, all of a sudden I'm outside of my bedroom, and it felt very different. And I remember putting my chin on the corner of the building and looking up and noticing the clouds sort of grazing over the building. And I have never experienced anything like that, because all of a sudden something that was very still was up against something that was moving. And that experience was very unique, and I never kind of felt anything like that. And it left an impression on me. Then 9/11 happened a couple years later, so I think I was around 10 or something like that, or 12. And that also left an impression on me, because all of a sudden these towers that I once experienced were no longer there. And that really changed the skyline of the city, and I really noticed that. Another interesting experience was when my mother took me to the Museum of Natural History for the first time. And I remember going there and experiencing this grand space for the first time. You know, it's like really, really interesting. You have these prehistoric skeletal dinosaurs, and people are sort of walking around it, and they're observing it together as a collective. And I've never experienced anything like that either, so that really sort of made an impression in my memory. Another one was basically growing up, my grandmother and my mother would build these nativity scenes basically every Christmas. And that was really interesting, because I consider that to be sort of the first models that I used to kind of work with. Because all of a sudden you're walking around this thing and you're seeing it at a different scale than you are, and you're sort of analyzing it in a sense. Moving forward, fast forwarding now to like teenage years and into high school, I was a terrible student. I've told this to many of my students. Wasn't good at math, wasn't good at science, didn't read much, didn't care for school at all, actually. All I cared about was graffiti and hanging out with my friends. And we would always go out into the town. This is in New Jersey, and this is going towards high school, and we would just tag things and tag random things on and wherever we saw it. But eventually we found a place, this was in London, New Jersey, where the owner of the building actually provided a canvas for kids to come and do graffiti without getting in trouble. And it was the first time that I was like given an opportunity for such behavior. And it was really interesting. I consider that like my first project. This is actually not my work. Over time, more work has been produced that layered on top of itself, and it sort of creates this geological strata of paint over time, which I found really interesting. But the thing that I found interesting about graffiti, and I'll explain why I'm bringing it up later on in the presentation, is that it brought a sense of wonder. It sort of made you stop and think about something different than the daily things that you do in your daily life. It made you stop and think. And for me, it sort of, what it did was it made me stop and think about how in the world someone got to that specific location on the side of that building and actually put a piece of graffiti on that. And so that's why I found it interesting, because it made you wonder. It made you think about something other than yourself. That's me. And this was like, again, going into high school years. And I wasn't sure what I was doing. I was very sort of aimless, but all I wanted to do was the graffiti stuff and hang out with friends. And so I paid the price. In high school, I had a 1.2 GPA because of this. And so that was like terrible. But high school was also the place that I got introduced to architecture. And it was through a mechanical drawing class that I took in freshman year. It was the only class that I actually really liked and felt really good doing it. And up until junior year, I was taking that class, and I was learning about drawing by hand with a T-square, all that stuff. And it was the only class that I cared about. But the problem was that the high school didn't want to graduate me because I had a 1.2 GPA. And because it was a private school, they had this kind of deal with they had a program with Outward Bound, where if you did the program, you were allowed to graduate. And it was basically designed for students who aren't able to learn through books or through courses. They're for people that only learn through experiences. And so the expedition was to do the Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine for a few months. And if you completed that, you graduated. And so that's what I did. And so they put you there with a whole bunch of other people that are in a similar situation, and you have to work together as a team. And we had to navigate through topography maps and use a compass to navigate and bushwhack through the trail. So it was really interesting, and I got to learn skills that were really important later on. So I graduated, and the only school that accepted me was City Tech. This is what it looked like back then. This is about 2009, 2010 maybe, and it was actually a brick-clad building. And it had these sort of ribbon windows on the side, and it was just about to go into a renovation process to look like what it looks like today, this glass building that you see. And so while I was here, sorry, this is not working. While I was here, it went through that renovation process, and it was going through this process of being made. I find it interesting that the lecture is called Voorhees-Made, because when I was going here, it was actually being made into something else. And so it was a black box, a windowless black box when I was here. And so we were isolated from the world, and architecture was happening in there. And so eventually it turned into this, what you know now. Well, while I was in there, I was learning about architecture. So keep in mind that I only knew about mechanical drawing and somewhat thought I knew about architecture. I thought architecture was just about drawing. But I came into the school and I started learning more about it. You might recognize this assignment. This is my very first assignment in the school, and you might have had a similar assignment. This is the juror's letter assignment. And we were asked to choose a letter and draw it in plan, section, elevation, and draw it, and practice our lettering and so on and so forth. I thought this was super easy, by the way. I was like, mechanical drawing really trained me. This is easy. I went to the next exercise, which was rectilinear forms, which I'm sure some of you might recognize. It was to put together 3 prisms in a sort of composition and then draw it in perspective, 2-point perspective, and so on and so forth. So up until this point, I thought the exercises were super easy, and boy was I wrong, because then came the third assignment. And this is the first time in my life where I had some sort of blockage in college where I didn't know what to do. And it was the first time in my life that I was asked to come up with a concept, to think in an abstract way, and to synthesize ideas to produce a sunshade device that would get placed somewhere in Dumbo Park. I forgot. And this is what I came up with, which I think is horrible, but I'm going to show it to you because I think you should see it. And so I had a very difficult time understanding how to think abstractly. That was probably my weakness. I was just good at the mechanical stuff. And so what I did was I, at this school, started taking art classes. And I started taking some other classes at BMCC and I believe at City College. But I started taking some art classes to be able to try to think abstractly or try to do something that I wasn't used to. And so I started doing life drawing. I started to work with charcoal a little bit to understand the different material to draw things. I was drawing different sort of images. I was also practicing with oil painting, and I was practicing with compositions, and I was practicing how light and color and tone sort of work together with oil paintings, and just try to do stuff to sort of expel ideas. And I was drawing and painting things, and this was all in parallel with the courses I was taking at City Tech. And I was having a really difficult time thinking conceptually while I was here because, again, I didn't understand what the professors were asking for. They were speaking in such an architectural sort of realm that I just didn't know how to transcend that. And so I kept, doing just side projects on my own and sort of developing that. And eventually something clicked. And basically what I realized was that all the things that I was learning in school, these things about hierarchy, things about composition and proportions and all that stuff, I was actually doing that when we were doing graffiti. I just didn't have a way to articulate myself at the time to be able to understand that that's what I was doing. So there's, this was a way for me to sort of reintroduce that back into the projects. And that's when I really noticed the difference in my projects, and I really felt like like an attachment to them that allowed me to really think about them in a more interesting way and having more fun with it. So all of a sudden I was coming out of this like blockage, if you will. And I was coming up with these sort of spatial conditions. I was thinking about transparencies, and the projects were a bit chaotic, and I was just making stuff that was in my head, and but I just kept doing it. I kept having fun with it, and eventually this whole idea of program came in when I started taking the more advanced classes. And so now I had to come up with a design where there was program requirements involved, and like that was super hard, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you have struggled with that. But what I did was to overcome that was, because at the same time we were also learning the computer, and we weren't good at the computer, and so it ends up controlling you. So what I ended up doing was, let me stick back to my roots, let me stick back to this hand stuff. And so I ended up doing all of my projects by hand. And yes, I was learning the computer, but by the end of the semester, my entire project was by hand. But I felt like I had more control over it. And so I was able to control light and shadow. The models were by hand. I was able to control light and weights a little bit more. I was able to think about how light entered into the building. Sorry, this is not going at the pace I wanted to. And I was able to then look at other architects that were producing work like Paul Rudolph, for example, and I got inspired by that stuff and started drawing. I kept drawing, and I kept drawing, and I kept producing stuff, and I found more attachment to the projects by doing it that way. There. So, I just kind of showed you a little bit of the work that I did while I was here, but it started off very sort of rough. I was fumbling around and I had to kind of find my bearings. And so I looked back at certain experiences in my past, and I recommend that you try to do that too, because I think that's a way to engage with some sort of attachment to the project, because these projects, they might feel foreign and they might feel like you're not really attached to it, so that might be a way for you. While I was here, I also got an internship, and I recommend that all of you try to get an internship. That's super important. The internship that I got was actually, I found it to be interesting. It wasn't directly at an architecture office. It was through DASNY, which is the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York, which is it's a state agency. But on the 8th floor, there was actually a poster, asking for someone to, be an intern for the summer. And I took that poster and I applied, and I got in. And basically, what they did was for that summer, I was working at a construction site which was at the World Trade Center. So when the towers fell, they actually sliced through the BMCC building, the original one, and you can see it on the left here. And so the project was to go through a whole decontamination process and deconstruct the building piece by piece down to like the bathtub foundations, and then propose a new building, which was by Paycop Freed, and it was this brick-clad building that they proposed. And so I got to see the superstructure go up for that, and that was really interesting because up until this point I haven't really been into a construction site. And you get to meet the trades, you see the glaziers and the steel workers and the carpenters, and you see how they get along or don't get along, and it's like really interesting stuff. And it had nothing, I felt at the time, it didn't feel like there was direct correlation to the courses I was taking, but eventually I sort of found them. But what was good about it was that I got exposed to different people. And so I met Craig Dumas, which is project architect for that building, and he was working at Paycop Freed, and I convinced him to give me another internship the next summer, the same building. And so he accepted. I don't know how that happened, but it was pure luck. So I came back the following summer, and this time I got to look at the precast brick panel enclosures coming into the building. And my job was basically to look at the panels coming in and check for deficiencies and like mark it off on a drawing. So it was really, really interesting. Moving forward, then I graduated City Tech, and I went to City College and then Columbia. But at City College, where I met Demir actually, we did a study abroad for a semester, and I did it in Barcelona. And basically, if you have a chance to do a study abroad, you should absolutely do it because it's going to change your life. And what I did was I did a trip to Portugal with Demir actually, and we got to do a tour of Alvarez's office, and he actually ended up seeing my sketchbook, and he invited me to stay for an internship. And so I became a model maker for that office, and I was making these models, and I don't know what I was doing, but I was making models. That's all I knew. And this is the office. It was very interesting office. There's a very specific structure in how they worked. And so I decided to turn that into my career, or into my way into architecture. So I started building models and started to kind of market myself as that. And I got another internship at Asymptote Architecture, where I was in the basement making models for them. This is a museum for a project in Germany. And surrounded by all these models that other people have made in the past, and it was really interesting. Like one of my first times at an architecture office where I felt like it was something very new, and sort of that launched my career. I got into architecture through construction and model making, not sort of straight into design or straight into sitting at an office sort of thing. And I actually realized that was a really good way to go into it. And so I ended up working at System Architects for basically a decade, which is a small firm that was founded by Jeremy Edmiston in '97, and eventually became a partner there. And this is a project that we did there. It's a small project, and I'll run through these sort of quickly now. This was during the pandemic. We needed to design these panels that were operable, that transformed a dividing wall into a bedroom.
Hmm?
Is that,
Technical difficulties.
could I maybe close that?
now and I'll get some help.
All right. Anyway, that was this operable project. Is it working?
Might have to.
Oh.
No.
Well,
Well, why do you charge the rate beforehand? Seriously, think about what you're doing.
Oh, it came out. It fell out. That's what happened.
Damn.
That don't make sense.
That sucks.
well, I was almost done.
Yeah, still,
I could just continue without it if you don't care.
it's fine.
Up to
Next
you.
time, charge
Yeah.
it. Nobody's charging.
So I was going to show you the projects. So we mostly concentrated on residential projects in commercial projects, and the projects spanned from Australia to here in New York and in Ecuador. And eventually I realized, like, oh, I'm doing so much residential and commercial stuff. This is getting a little boring, and so I needed a career change, or I needed to focus on different types of projects. And so recently, actually, I've left System Architects and went to another firm, which Professor Park mentioned. It's at Henry Smith Miller's office. There I am doing government projects for the GSA, which are land port of entry projects between Vermont and Canada. And it's really different typology of building. There's a lot of things that have to do with surveillance and technology and how they scan your cars and all this stuff. So there's a lot of coordination. It's very different to what I was used to. That was going to be it. And I was going to leave you with some tips, which I can't remember because I listed it on the last slide. But one of them that I do remember is you should embrace your past. I think you should recognize what your memories are. There are good ones and bad ones, and I think for the bad ones you should just turn them into something positive. There's always some way to do that, especially in architecture. So embrace that, and if this turns on, I'll
come back
give you
to
the
it.
more points, but somebody had a question.
I have an HDMI and I can just. Oh yeah, one of
The
these.
governmental contract you have over in Vermont, how does your architecture fit into, their goal, if you're allowed to talk about their goal of having,
You're going upstairs.
like surveillance, is it like covert,
Yeah.
like make it so that
You want me to just? Yeah, I guess not. Or you just plug it right in.
Yeah, there's a lot of components to it. In the end, it's a building, right? And the building has all of these moving parts to it. There's a front of a building, there's the back of the building, there's the components that go into the building in terms of how it works, in terms of climate and solar shading and blah, blah, blah. There's all these things that are required to be implemented into the building, and they all need to be coordinated because they all take up space. And so you got to figure out how to fit them all in, but at the same time fulfill programmatic requirements in terms of how the building needs to function, in terms of how people are using it, right? So you have moments where cars are coming in, they're showing their passport, and then they're passing by.
so you're using like foresight, like what the actual function of the building is going to be to help you design
Yeah,
what's going on.
right. And then there's conceptual ideas about like, what is this kind of building going to look like? What's the form of it? And conceptually, how is it functioning, and how can that be maybe expressed architecturally? There's a bunch of things that have to kind of get coordinated, but you don't do it by yourself. It's impossible. You're working with a team, and the best projects are really where the team is really truly working together. And so I was talking about the internship is like this is my first time seeing people working together in sometimes intense moments, and being able to handle those situations or working within that and participating productively is like really, really important. But
One follow-up,
yeah.
unrelated to the first question. Before the TV cut off, it was a really nice picture thing you designed with the shade, the door.
Yeah.
How did you come up with that?
So that was a series of studies. I think you have to right-click and then open. So that was a series of studies. It was basically the client wanted to have a dividing wall between the living room and another space that was further back from the living room. And it was during the pandemic, so everyone was trying to do the whole live-work thing, and he had a family, so he needed a space that could transform into an office and his kids won't bother him. So there was like acoustic issues, and there was also this issue of light coming in, but I'll
The Zoom. You gotta get the Zoom.
Oh, yeah, there's a better people.
we used a Python script to produce a geometry that allowed light and also blocked sound in a specific way, and then the assembly of the sandwich of the panel is also very specific in terms of the materials to control. So it's very performative, and all of the projects are very performative. Yeah, if you wanted to know how it was done, it was on Python.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
It's awesome. I think about how you're using physics to make it so that,
Yeah, but it started off with a hand sketch.
like, what's that?
It started off with a hand sketch.
Yeah. Awesome.
It always starts with a drawing.
Sorry?
It always starts with a drawing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the point that I was trying to make was like, if you practice drawing, or you don't have to be a good drawer. You just have to be able to express your ideas well enough for others to understand. And if you practice that, then the clearer the idea is for yourself, and the easier you can control the computer to do what you need it to do. Yeah, that was sort of the point of that.
Have you ever returned to graffiti for fun?
No, I look down upon it.
No.
So it's funny because the apartment where I live at, we live on the ground floor, and there's people doing graffiti there, and I get upset.
Now you're the guy yelling at them.
It might just be bad graffiti.
Yeah, well, that too.
Yeah.
Maybe they just need lessons. I don't know.
Can I pass?
Yeah, it's back on.
It's not working.
No, it's not working.
I got a question. Did you do the Appalachian Trail to graduate?
Yeah,
The entire thing?
from Georgia to Maine.
Oh.
It extends a little further, but that's the main thing. So I promise I'll finish as fast as I can. That was a project. That's how it transforms. The other projects in Australia, these residential projects, were very. They were really interested in sort of how the climate worked, and so they were very specific to the climate in Australia, and they were essentially trying to bring the outdoors inside. And this one had a particular courtyard in the center of it. And here's some drawings of it. There was a screen in the north and south that allowed for balcony spaces. There's another project on Weary Beach, which was basically responding to the solar choreography of the site, but also to sort of prevailing wind directions. And so we worked with cross ventilation ideas, and we had this breezeway down the middle where we basically created this space where people can go from their bedrooms to the living room and circulate through the building. Senior housing was another one, which was perched in the forest, and this is sort of a roof plan of that. And then this kind of site plan. And so we were always, playing with color, drawing on top of our drawings with watercolors and things like that to sort of express vegetation sometimes. Another project, slightly bigger, this was probably the largest project that I worked on. And then 187 Franklin Street, which is a project here in downtown Tribeca. You're welcome to go and see it whenever you want. And is a brick townhouse project that was basically, again, responding to very specific contextual conditions. It was a landmark district, but at the same time was responding to the solar choreography of the sun of that specific place, in the sense that it was a north-facing facade, and in New York City, north-facing facade for a residence isn't that great. You need to have a certain percentage of direct sunlight by code. And so because this is an alteration type 1, which is when you change occupancy type. So it used to be a commercial project, and we changed it to a residential. And we were trying to bring light through these light scoops in, and so we angled the walls in different directions that were specific to early morning and late evenings when we found that the sun was actually hitting the facade of the building, and so we used them as light scoops to bring them in. And it produced a certain geometry within the project and in the interior spaces. And because Landmarks wanted bricks, we then used bricks to then weave around the windows. But it's actually very standard construction. It's a 2 white brick construction at the exterior and with a 1 white construction at the interior. And insulation in the middle that goes from 4 inches to 8 inches in some cases, 1 inch air gaps. It's a cavity wall. And it's very standard stuff. It's just that we produced tools that actually generated the way in which the mason would place the brick. And so this is laid brick by brick, and it was done in 6 months. So the points. So what does this mean to you? So I mentioned embrace your experiences. I think that's really important. Pursue opportunities. So if you see an internship somewhere, go for it. Do it. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be for an expediter. Do it, because you're going to meet people that are outside the school, and I think that's really important. Know your strengths and weaknesses, of course. The sooner that you know that, the sooner you could actually work on them. And trust your instincts, take risks, all that stuff. And start where you can, make the most of that. You know, we don't start, you know, I don't come from a family of architects or anybody. You know, I started at 0, literally ground zero, if you will. I just started where I could, and I turned it into something. And I'm going to leave you with the last thing, which is the world is bigger than you. And so I think that if you want to be seen, you should participate and contribute. And I'll leave you with a question that you don't have to answer tonight or for the next 5 years, but what is it that you will contribute? I will leave you with that. And that's it.
The next speaker is Demir Purisic.
Thanks.
I don't know where it is.
Is this it?
Yeah.
No, you might have to reopen it. Good evening, everyone.
Nice person.
Which USB is yours?
Got me nervous with that whole thing.
Well, I guess we can do that copy one. Just right click on it. The one below it.
Let's not plug it in.
Can you do it with, yeah, okay. It's above, at the top now. It's recent.
I usually do Control L, maybe? Nice. Let me see if it will. Okay, cool. Good evening, everyone. So my name is Demir Purisic, and I just want to first say great presentation, Chris. I'm glad in a way the way you structured yours, because it was very sort of focused on your city tech career and before and et cetera, and that development. In my case, when I thought about this lecture series, and again, thank you all for coming and thanks for the invite. When I thought about this lecture series, I wanted to kind of focus on my career past City Tech and sort of the things that I've done since then and the things that I think everybody in this room, especially the students obviously, are capable of doing, and the things that I'm sort of proud of that I think City Tech contributed to and my education contributed to. So I'm gonna structure the lecture in a few chapters in a way. So the first is learning and exploring, and they kind of go chronologically. So everything is from after I left City Tech and then my career post City Tech. So learning and exploring, working, collaborating, ultimately building, and then teaching at the end. So sort of coming full circle a little bit. So from learning and exploring, the reason I wanted to focus, actually let me go back. The reason I wanted to focus on these sort of chapters is because as I looked at my I think, still short career. There's a few things in hindsight that I noticed I was doing that perhaps I didn't necessarily plan. So what I was really interested in, and this kind of, again, is in hindsight and looking back, is learning as much as possible, as quickly as possible early on in the career, and especially taking positions and, in a way, risks, and kind of taking a stab at things earlier on. Because I think the younger you are, and this is sort of especially for the students, like the younger you are, the more chances you have at these things in a way. And so I would urge you to take that into account and really kind of go for anything and everything as you explore your career. So this first one is learning and exploring, and this is a photo of us watching a tractor video on YouTube with Rem Koolhaas in the Netherlands, and I'll explain that a little bit more in a second. But so this is post graduation and post my master's degree, and so again, explore and experiment early on, and this is something that I believe to this day, and I think is really important. So this first project that I'll be speaking about is a research project, and it was done while I was in my last semester at the GSD, and then a few months after that. And so this was a research studio in the Netherlands with Rem Koolhaas, and so no buildings were made, no buildings were designed, no architecture was drawn. It was purely studying existing things and researching and producing work, and ultimately an exhibition, and ultimately a publication or a book. So the interest, and this is, a lot of this work is from OMA, the office that I was a part of. So this is not purely my own individual work. Some of it is my individual work, but some of it is from the larger team as well. So the early interest in looking at the countryside, which is what this exhibition was about, is that primarily architectural publication and research has been focused on the city, and so the countryside became a topic for Rem Koolhaas to study, and this is what also interested me. I'm going to go a little bit quicker in this, but essentially the entire exhibition focused on the entire world in a series of specific locations. So the one I was primarily focused on, I don't know if I have a laser here, but it's the Great Plains region, so that big, long, tall rectangle going across from north to south of the United States. And what we looked at was essentially how the farmland of the United States feeds the rest of the country and how it has evolved over time. And so the way we did that is we actually embarked on a 1,000 roughly mile long journey via a RV, which we then had a drone following us that I was operating that filmed the entire region to sort of showcase the transformation of this whole area and how important it is to the United States for agricultural growth. And then ultimately led to doing a research book, and that was kind of published and became a part of the exhibition. So this is the RV, and that's the drone on the top right, and that's my drone license in the bottom right, because I had to get licensed as a drone pilot in order to do this. And so there was 4 of us in the RV. My wife is actually here. She was a part of it as well. So pretty crammed in there. And we were essentially driving the RV, had the drone flying over and recording the entire length. And so these are some of the still images from that film. And as you can see, the sort of premise or the idea that we were trying to convey is sort of how barren looking this land is, but really how actually important it is to feeding the rest of us, essentially, or the whole country. And so just a few more stills. And so the entire video actually was then exhibited in the Countryside exhibition at the Guggenheim Museum. And this was a 24-hour film, so you could sit there if you would like for 24 hours approximately and just see the entire, from Canada to nearly Mexico, the entire length of the Great Plains region. So once that happened and once that was over, I had bills to pay, and I realized that research, actually, and this is another lesson for the students, that research doesn't really pay all that much. And so I had to get a serious job, quote unquote. And so the next chapter of my life, or the next chapter of my career, was the chapter of becoming a professional, gaining experience, and actually working in the world of architecture. And so I joined SOM, Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, and I'm going to quickly show a few projects from there during my time there. And so it's a very large firm, and essentially the things that I learned from it and the things that I kind of took away from it are about how to operate as a professional architect, about how to sort of do the due diligence of kind of developing your career, working with other people, working in larger teams, et cetera. And some of the other lessons I learned was that you also lose a lot in a job as well. So most of my projects there were either competitions or projects that will not get built. And so that's another layer of architecture that I think you're not exposed to in school. You sort of think everything becomes a model, everything becomes something at the end, but in reality, most of the work that I did at SOM likely will never become a real building. But regardless of that, it was an incredible experience. So to put that in perspective, these are 4 proposals, or 4 towers rather, for the same project, which is for one competition, for what is now JP Morgan Chase. And we obviously lost that competition. But I'm just showcasing that there's a large swath of architecture that's obviously massive and I think incredibly beneficial early on, especially to learn about and to experience and to kind of be a part of. And then you win some competitions.
Wait, you
So
won the first one?
no, we lost the first one.
No, it's the fourth one I said.
This one we won, yes. So this was another competition, which we actually ended up winning, which I'm pretty proud of. And it was one of the projects that I worked the most amount of time on. It's a tower in the city, a commercial tower, which I'm hoping also will get built soon, but has not yet. I'm gonna also kind of jump through these a little bit more. And then there's another one which was, or was located in Jersey City, which is a residential tower. And so again, looking at this, I'm sort of looking back and kind of, one is emphasizing the fact that this is a process regardless, and that it's about working together as a team, pushing the sort of boundaries, trying to challenge these competitions in a way, and then ultimately accepting in some cases that things don't go your way, and you simply learn and move on. Just a few more images from that. So as I moved from SOM, I was there for about 3.5 years, and I took all of that experience and decided to get my license and decided to actually become an individual licensed architect. And what that has done for me is I sort of went from experimenting and went from kind of taking some of these risks to trying to experience things on my own and decide to work on my own in order to continue to learn, essentially. And so once I left SOM, I got my license and began doing work on my own. But before I get to those projects, I'm gonna talk a little bit about collaborations. So I've been also very lucky to have a few other architects that I've worked with in the last couple of years that I've actually collaborated on projects with. And this is another thing that I think was an important lesson in hindsight for me, is to kind of say yes to everything, essentially. Especially, again, early on in your career, I think there's opportunities that you don't really understand you have access to until after the fact. And so most of the couple of projects I'll show here are projects that I would never be able to do alone. I would not have the means or the knowledge to do alone, but I'm able to contribute to as a team, essentially. And so 2 of these are, the one on the left is a library in Mississippi, and then the one on the right is a kind of conceptual stadium for a artist. And so again, I'll sort of just speak about, not the details of these, but emphasizing the fact that these are larger scale projects that I'm proud of, and I think emphasize that you need a team and a set of professionals to be able to do it all together. So this library is, we're actually moving into the next phase. It just got brought back, which is wonderful. And so I'm hoping that it'll be built in the next few years. What was great about this project is typically you don't work as much with brick in a place like New York City, unless you're working on smaller projects or residential projects, for example. So this was kind of exciting for me because we're getting to dive into brick as a material and looking at how diverse it is as a material and how much functionality it has, as well as being actually very sort of manipulative in a way. So you can create shapes with it that, as Chris showed in the previous project, that are not necessarily expected. And then just a couple more images in that one. The next one is a stadium. Again, as I said, it's a conceptual stadium. So this is a project that I collaborated with Studio Stitzgard of, who's actually a former professor of mine from City College. Both of these projects are actually collaborations with him. And this one is a little bit of a conceptual stadium where we're working with an artist who wants to kind of build a temporary ground up stadium for individual performances, move it to the next location, rebuild it, create a performance, etc. And so it's sort of like an active environment in a way. And then a potential rendering of hopefully what it'll end up looking like. So as I continued these collaborations, I got my license, and I'm continuing to sort of do both at the same time. Once I received my license, I decided I wanted to open my own practice and actually try and use that license and see what happens, basically. So I'm happy to show some projects that I've worked on that are my own individual projects through my firm. And so this is the chapter called Building. And what I want to emphasize in this chapter is that you don't know what you don't know. And a part of that whole ethos of experimenting and kind of trying new things and going after projects, etc., you're always going to be in the dark in a way. And a part of that is you sort of have to accept that, and have to accept that with pretty much with every single project you're going to do, you're going to miss something or you're going to not know about something that you eventually learn. It's not the end of the world. It's sort of a part of the process. It's the same as your studio projects and how you start from the beginning of the semester not really knowing what anybody is talking about to by the end being able to speak about your project fluently. And so that sort of continues. It's a little bit more stressful after, but it does continue. So the other thing that I learned, which I also wanted to kind of emphasize, is we don't really speak about, I think it's starting to happen now that we're speaking about running a firm, about business and architecture, about actually what it takes to pay the bills and actually have a functioning office in a way. And so from my experience, what I've learned is that my license went a long way. There's a lot of projects that I've gotten that perhaps I won't have in my portfolio that have actually helped me get other projects that I can then develop for my portfolio, for example. So it goes back again to the same thing I want to reiterate of take the chances, experiment, explore, understand that everything that comes your way is an opportunity. And so I threw together a bunch of floor plans of projects that are not the prettiest, or not something that I would publish in a magazine, but they are projects I'm proud of. They're projects I learned from. They're projects that help me pay the bills of the office and myself, etc. And projects that I'll continue to do. And what that does is it allows opportunity for projects that I would happily show to everybody, where those are based, or those are more focused on building your portfolio, building the brand, building the actual projects you want to get down the line. And so some of those that I'll talk about very quickly are a couple of, I'll start with this small one. This is actually a tiny greenhouse in a backyard of a friend of mine in Brooklyn. And it's essentially just a small space where we bought a existing greenhouse, filled it up with glass layers of acrylic in order to create a space during the summertime that's sort of a little bit of a kaleidoscope, a little bit more of an exciting space. Another one is a project that I'm doing with actually a friend of mine who's a designer as well, and it's called a super cafe, and it's essentially an outdoor space for the public to use that has these movable benches that are actually made of recycled plastic that are formed into these shapes and are meant to be used by general public. Each of the shapes is a unique one that creates a pattern once you put them all together, sort of snake-like pattern. And this is, the previous project is a part of a larger one. This is arguably my biggest project to date, and it's located in Brooklyn, and it's a 10,000 square foot, used to be an auto body shop that was then converted into a creative space. So it's filled with galleries, with screen printing, with recording studios. We just built a soccer field on the roof, which took forever, but we're really excited about that, and has a few other additional spaces that are used by the community, but also used by artists and creatives alike. And we happily had our opening last year, and then the soccer field opening a couple of months ago, which has been very exciting. And some images of that finally completed soccer field. So I want to emphasize one thing as I kind of close out this chapter. You may have already met your first client, and so what I mean by that is I didn't know it at the time, right? And looking back at it, this is something that I found very interesting as I was putting together this lecture. I thought about some of the projects I'm most proud of and some of the projects that have helped me in a way, and I realized that a lot of the clients for these I have known for over 10 years in some cases. So I did a quick little doodle diagram which shows on the left-hand side the year 2006, and then on the right-hand side the year 2026. And you can see at the top where I met the time I met each individual client, and then on the bottom a red line leading to when I actually began to work with them on the project. And so in some cases, or in two cases rather, two of my clients are my longtime friends who I met in 2006, and now I'm actually building with almost 20 years later. And then a few others are scattered in between, one from 2012 who I did a project with in almost 10 years later in 2022. And I want to kind of emphasize that fact as well, is to piggyback on what Chris said about getting out there, putting yourself out there, and actually understanding that most of what you're going to do is outside of City Tech and is outside of the school as well. And it's important to know that from the get-go, you might meet people who could give you an opportunity. They may not have that opportunity yet. They might not be able to give it yet, but down the line it's something that might be a potential fun project for you. And then lastly, I'm going to close it out with a quick little teaching chapter to sort of bring it full circle. I've been happy to teach at City Tech for the last, I believe, 6 years now, and I'm also teaching at City College as well as NYIT, so I'm a little bit scattered each semester depending on how many classes. But the thing that makes me really proud, and especially to give a lecture here, is that I'm happy to sort of bring things back to my roots, to understand and to sort of show that it is possible to get out there and do fun and exciting projects, but to also never forget where you came from, and that every student that I teach, I sort of see myself in them in a way, and it makes me really kind of proud to be a part of that. So with that, I say thank you and have a good night. Thanks.
So our last presenter is Justin Sherman, and after Justin's presentation, I'll open up the floor for the questions.
Do you need a presentation?
Oh yeah, they closed it. If you go to maybe recents, like if you open Acrobat and then go to File Recents.
All right, well, as we're getting set up here, I just want to thank everyone for the opportunity. It's great to see some familiar faces and some faces I haven't seen in a while.
You want me to try?
Great job, guys.
So go to
Very
File,
inspiring.
menu.
And yeah, we share some commonalities, which you'll see.
Here, open recent.
Wanted to start, I guess, with a quote.
Is
It's
it
a
one
little corny, I guess, but I forget when this was from. But at one point, I got asked for an article to come up with something, and so it's interesting to look back on these things. So my quote is, "Whoever said if you do what you love, you won't work a day of your life, was likely not an architect. It is arduous, it is ever challenging, and it is exactly what I want to be doing. Perfect harmony of art and science. There's a shared vision with my colleagues about what architecture can and should be, which keeps my fire alive. We face many challenges in the industry, as a society, and on a global ecological scale. We cannot change the world overnight or through architecture alone, but we can strive in our practice to meet the goal that Gandhi set and be the change that we want to see. So, that was-
It's not this one. It's like that.
And then on another quote note, I don't know who did it outside, but I really love what's written on the sidewalk there, which is, remember what it took for you to be here. So I've enjoyed reading that as I'm walking up, very tired and stressed from my office, which is only a 10-minute walk away, so I leave my desk and walk over every Tuesday and Thursday evening. And now that it's dark and I read that, it's nice, it's inspiring. So my presentation is calling it a Journey Through Architecture, and it's pretty thorough in terms of my whole kind of life story, and the goals are to share my triumphs, my failures, and essentially to show that you can become ultimately very successful, but as Chris said, you know, you're not always sure where you're going, and you can get lost at times and question things and doubt yourself, but you just kind of stick with it, and ultimately things can work out. Okay. So, early education. I grew up in upstate New York, Columbia County, middle of nowhere. It's not even a town, it's called a hamlet because it has less than 200 people or something. It's on a farm, and I don't know if you're familiar, but it's a Waldorf school, Rudolf Steiner. There's some in the city. So my graduating class was 22 kids, and so it was like a family. The whole school was, I think, high school was 90 people or something, so very tight-knit, and I couldn't wait to get out of there, which is why I went to a big city. But it's very focused on arts and connection to nature, and it's interesting, Chris, because it's all about that alternative learning approach, where you're not just stuck in a classroom taking tests, like to study botany and all these things. We're like wandering around looking at flowers and things like that. So this kind of education has actually got much more popular after the pandemic. People are finding that it's really nice to learn in different ways and really, you know, connect to nature and yeah, not just try to pass exams. So this is examples of a projective geometry, and this is what really taught me the discipline and like self-focus that it takes to get through architecture. So like that's 11 by 17, and that's all done with a compass and a pen and a ruler. So it's just like 1,000 lines to create that interesting shape, and then we learned about the 13 configuration and all these ratios and things that go back to ancient Greece and everything. So it was fun to look back on all this stuff. I'm glad I kept these things in boxes all this time. So yeah, I had a lot of focus in arts. To me, this was just what everybody did. So looking back, it's like, oh wow, this is pretty special, because, you know, we were sort of forced to do these things, and generally I was happy to do it, but you know, this is a hand drawing. We had woodworking, and so I made a custom box just from, you know, making up an idea. I gave it to my sister. And there's sculpture, stained glass. Again, that's, you know, I started with a sketch, and then you cut it into little pieces, and then you find the glass, and it's a really fun process. I'd love to have more time to do these things. That's my next goal in life, is to come back to my roots, as was said, and enjoy these things. So this was my first introduction to architecture. Patrick Stolfo's course, my neighbor upstate still, that I saw recently. And it's called A Survey of Architecture, and it was fun to go back and see these like quotes and definitions of architecture, because at the time I had no idea what architecture was really. Okay, it's buildings, it's old buildings, it's design, but what is it? And so this was a fun thing to establish some roots. We Greek columns all the way to modern architecture. So it was a fun thing to unearth these things. And then in terms of my life up there, so I was one of four sisters, and I grew up in like a raised ranch house and is constantly under renovation. Because all the kids, my father was actually a founding teacher of that school. And so no one ever had time to finish anything, so I got introduced to architecture as well, like very young, by having blueprints lying around, like while I was in a crib, and then I worked through high school and finishing odd jobs up in my house, and I taught myself construction and materials, and there was like a pool cabana in the back that was just concrete, and I designed and built that eventually. So every summer we'd make improvements. And then when I decided in high school like to explore architecture more, I worked at an internship with a local guy, and I was excited. I didn't know what I was going to be doing, and they said, okay, young Justin, you're going to, here, we're working on some fancy dog houses for this rich lady down the road. And so I spent the summer drawing dog houses, amongst other things, but they didn't seem very happy in general, and I kind of was questioning, I was like, this seems boring, and so it wasn't a great first impression. But then I spoke with another architect who worked on our house and had these renovation plans, and he was much more inspired, and I did some work with him as well. So when it came to applying to school, yeah, my mom, she's like, oh, that makes sense. You actually declared it when you were 6 years old that you wanted to be an architect. So I didn't know where to go. My counselor, when I asked, I was like, so schools in New York? And I think he said that I don't think there are any schools in New York. I don't know. So I applied to RISD and Northeastern and some others, and I wanted to get out of my small little town, so I went to Northeastern in Boston. Huge, lecture classes with 100, 200 people. Had to learn 100 vocabulary words a week for each exam. And it was fun, and but ultimately I wasn't sure still what I wanted to do. And it was expensive. I was already starting to think, do I really want to be in that much debt when I graduate, and all these questions. I really wanted to pursue music, which was really maybe my number one thing. I played a lot of instruments and loved to sing. And so my father and sister were in Manhattan. I wanted to be in a, quote, real city. I felt like Boston at the time was sort of a giant college town. So I came to New York not really knowing what I was going to do. And I got into NYU for music. But then I said, okay, well, what do I want out of architecture and music? And I decided that it was a safer bet to be an architect and have the ability to play around with music than vice versa. And that turned out to be a good choice. Because it's tough to make it as a musician. And so I enrolled in BMCC for calculus and physics. And then I came across City Tech for the fall. I just came in and talked to some folks, and I remember meeting with Wendell Edwards. I don't think he's here, but I see Robert here. Good to see you. And yeah, so I liked this atmosphere a lot because it reminded me of my school upstate. People were called by their first names as professors and small classrooms. So I started here, and then I figured just why not finish here? It's a great program. And so I got my first job from my AutoCAD professor. So I never used CAD, never even heard of it. And I said, this is interesting, and I just challenged myself to be really quick. And he said, wow, you're impressive. So he brought me into his work that he was doing, working for an architect who did all sorts of things, but primarily was working for a developer. And so my first project was ground-up condominium in Williamsburg, and it was just me, him, and the architect. And so I learned how to do everything from start to finish the right way, learn the wrong ways, but ultimately it was A to Z, from zoning studies all the way through construction. And so it was really valuable because I find that with people we hire now, and with other students and having conversations, you often don't get that broad experience. You're going to be working on, you know, quote unquote pigeonholed, and you're not necessarily going to get the whole picture unless it's, you know, maybe a single family house or anything. So I would encourage you all to try to get that big picture, but definitely just, you know, a variety of experience is important. So from there, I said, okay, it's time to move on, and I want to get more experience with like detailing and just maybe bigger office, obviously. So I worked at Howard Zimmerman, HLZA, and they do mostly like facade, a lot like restoration, but some reskinning and just very technical. And I knew it was sort of a stepping stone. Howard even joked me when he hired me, he said, it's not a stepping stone. I said, well, maybe it is, but anyway, so I did some interesting work there, and let's see, I guess we can move on. So this was the Hope Street project on the top. You know, one thing you find is that sometimes the renderings in offices don't really match the building in the end, so this is pretty close. And this was the time where, yeah, like rendering programs were a big challenge. I learned 3D Studio Max, but yeah. And then on the bottom here, the Parker Meridian Hotel, we redid the whole rooftop and pool area. It was all stripped down, so everything from the brick replacement details to learning about glass fin wall types, and this one, so there's kind of the finished photos there, and I got to work for the Blue Man Group in the Village. It's one of the oldest buildings in Manhattan in terms of, like, it's in the middle of Astor Place, in the middle of the block. There's just this building sitting there, like in the rear yard. And it's, when we went up to the rooftop, I just pulled apart the parapet. All the bricks just fell apart because the mortar was so old. So we took the whole thing down, built it back up, like from the 10 feet below the top, new roofs, skylights, and we worked on the interior as well. But it was just fun. It's, I mean, interesting. And I'd come down to see the Blue Man Group when I was 12 or something, and then to work, meet the owner, and all. It's interesting how things come full circle and connect. Okay, so then I moved on to ILA, Ismail Leyva Architects. Cool, interesting guy. He's almost retired now, but they're still going. He started with a note on the door, Ismail Leyva, and built up to being one of the most prominent architecture firms in the 90s. They kind of peaked, I guess, so to speak, but they were doing a lot of work. And when I joined, it was very busy. There were 130 people or something, so it was a big jump for me in terms of office size and projects, and it was hustle and bustle environment. But yeah, I worked on a lot of different projects. This one is Mercy College, and I always tried to incorporate my upbringing. I didn't draw these, but my sister actually drew these, so we tried to get her commission, and I was like, you could do this stuff in New York. She would do these things for upstate cafes and things, but so that was fun. And then these are the official renderings, and it's good not to show just pictures, right? But this is like the complexity of the filing drawing. It was like one of the most complicated building code and zoning issues, and it started off like as a simple sheet, and then we probably should have made it into multiple more sheets, but we just filled it up, and the examiner kept coming back with more comments. But that's just about as compact and complicated as a floor plan can get. Okay, so one important lesson is my students often ask me, should I go right into my master's? I want to do a master's. Should I do a master's? For me, I waited intentionally because I wasn't sure. As much as I was being successful and generally happy, but very stressed and wondering, is it all worth it? Where is this going? I waited because I didn't want to just commit right away. So I worked, and then it was like 6 years later that I said, I do want my master's, I want to reignite my passion for the design, and I miss the academic environment. So I went to Boston Architecture College. It's a fun program, and my thesis was modular adaptive housing. And it's interesting because now I've seen this, since then many people have been doing this and been very successful. So I often wondered if I had just taken this idea straight from college on my own. But yeah, it was a great experience, and it was, but to be honest, it was almost more as a credential. Like, I needed that professional degree to move up at some of these bigger firms. They do look at that, right? So I only had the 4-year degree from City Tech, and it's not a professional degree. Now you guys are lucky, you have the 5-year professional degree. But yeah, it was a good experience. Then my biggest project, where I was like the project manager and in charge of this whole thing, was the Greenpoint Tower, 145 West Street. And yeah, I was in charge of a team of 13 on-site meetings with 25 people around a giant table, engineers, contractors, and running the show. And it was an exciting challenge. The reality was that we redesigned the facade while they were pouring the podium, and me and the engineer would say, well, all the columns had to shift in 2 inches because the window wall ended up getting made in Italy, and their receptor was 2 inches deeper, and they could not change that, and so all the columns had to move in, and so there's this flurry of changing our drawings, sending them to the contractor. Did they pick it up in the shop drawings? When are they pouring the next columns tomorrow? And so we like, I think they got the last drawing, and it was just chaotic and crazy and fun. And I thought that was irregular, which is one of the reasons I left this firm, but it turns out that's kind of common now. So most of my projects are very fast track. Fast track is the new norm, at least in my current business. But yeah, it was interesting, and this was over 10 years ago, and now currently I'm working on another one like 2 doors down. So it's fun. And then this is Hudson Yards. ILA was architect of record for this, Tower D, and then this was our design, 606 West 30th. And it's not like I would say change the world architecture, but when you really work in this realm, you find how constrained things are. When it comes down to zoning, code, construction cost, feasibility, it's, a lot of it is just dictated, and your ability to do interesting things is limited. So that's what I think my current specialty is, and that's how I gain a lot of my experience, was within so many constraints, what is the best thing you can do? And so we did have this fun idea that there's at least this like punch out green wall, but this is just finishing now, so it's crazy, these timelines, right? I worked on we got this thing approved 10 years ago, and it just finished construction. But there was this, the base we integrated with the high line, so we put in like old steel features and like rivets and things to accent the high line. This was a hotel tower in Midtown that is also not built, which is why I included it, because this was my first project where I was heartbroken. I spent a couple of years on this, and like so many meetings, and we got all the way through approvals, and it turned out, I later learned, many years later, that the developer never intended to build it. They just wanted to package it and then resell it, and maybe down the line it would get built. So, those are interesting lessons to learn. But I learned a lot. It was fun. So we had to make this like special podium, and this is where I learned about really, custom curtain walls, where it's not just Conair 1600 off the shelf. You're gonna think about all the considerations. And then from there, I think I tried to time this. I'm not sure, but I think we have enough What's interesting as well is that when I started ILA, I said, I think in 5 years I'm going to work at SOM. Like that was my plan. And then on the fifth, like to the month, on the 5th year, I got a call from a friend who had left ILA and was at SOM and said, there's this position, do you want it? So I was like, well, kind of got to go for that. That was my plan. And so I joined SOM, and I got hired to do this crazy tower in Dubai that never ended up going forward. And so I kind of bounced around on all the different teams, and I got a lot of exposure. It was very stressful, but it was fun. I worked on an airport multimodal transportation hub in India, and got to fly on a fancy $9,000 ticket flight. I didn't even know that was a thing, but I had a bed and all this stuff. But then I show up at 3 in the morning and had to walk down to find the hotel with armed guards, and wake up at 7 a.m. and download files from the server, and get to a meeting by 9. It was very chaotic, but that's architecture. And then I worked on Penn Station for a bit, the remodeling. The whole thing was modeled in, that's where I got introduced to Enscape, and that you can put on virtual headsets, and we had the whole blocks modeled, and you could go through the connection point from 7th to 8th Avenue, and a big part of that was that, I don't know if you remember, that you'd hit your head almost on the beams, and so we doubled that height in that space, and then there's that huge portal on 7th Avenue with the double curvature glass and crazy expensive features there, but it turned out pretty nice. But it was interesting to be involved with the engineers and say, okay, if we cut this beam, then this column is actually supporting Madison Square Garden, and we have a drawing from like 1900 that is like a sketch of its load capacity and all this stuff. So it was a lot of fun, but a challenge. I worked on mostly international projects, and yeah, just met a lot of interesting people and worked very hard. And then COVID hit, so then it was not all I thought it would be, and I realized that I did want to work in a smaller firm and get back to more human scale, and back to maybe my residential roots. So I joined JFA, where I'm currently still working. We're pretty close by. I can actually see Voorhees rooftop from our office. It's a very nice office, 36th floor over there on 16 Court Street. And great people, and my goal was, to bring it back to reality and being real, right? At that point, I almost hung up my hat. I was like, I might have had enough with architecture. It's just stressful. I'm continually not finding what I want in terms of communication, and I was just kind of burnt out. And so I said, this is kind of my last shot to work in a bigger office with a bigger group of people. I've done some projects on the side for myself, but nothing major. As was mentioned, this is like, takes huge teams to accomplish these things, and sometimes you have a lot of your personal input, but it's recognized by the group. So with JFA, the mission is that we want to be human and just not deal with all the corporate nonsense of the bigger firms that can sometimes happen. So it's a great group. I'm very happy, but so I've been there 5.5 years. It flies by. And let's see what else. So I was gonna, SOM obviously is a little more controlling of the files, and some of the projects, like was mentioned, didn't even get built. So I wanted to just pull up the website. So this, I don't want to take too much of your time, so I'm gonna show you this project, which is 34 Hope Street. If you're ever in the area, go by at night. It's actually quite beautiful. It's one of the few that the reality is better than the rendering, like to be there and experience it, I feel. And so this was fun to work with these guys and put together this video. This was with Brick. This, they're pretty famous for their rendering and animations. So it's kind of encompasses our philosophy, just, again, within the constraints of New York City architecture, trying to do something nice and unique and different, volumetric. That portal there in the middle, well, here's a little connection to nature, this hanging tree. And all of the reality pictures actually turned out exactly like this. I should have included some pictures. But yeah, that portal, that light shaft portal is designed so that on the solstice, the sun shines all the way through it and and lights up a square of light on the bottom. So it's pretty cool to experience that. As designing it, we're like, is this going to be really that interesting, or is it a little kitschy? And but experiencing on the solstice day, the light coming down, and then talking to the residents about it, they really appreciate it. And then just some notable features is that the clients, it's hard to convince your clients to spend money, and that's your value as an architect, to say, yes, it's worth it. And for this project, there was two specific things that they fought us on that we went out on in the end. So there's this huge slope column just to create that opening at the street corner, and it took a lot of extra engineering cost and consideration, and form work and everything. And on these two aspects, the other being underhanging brick, which I'll talk a little bit more about, we actually put our money where our mouth is and said, you can take it out of our fee. The extra cost of doing the column and the actual underhanging brick. And what happened in the end was the building did so well, and they're getting top rents, and everyone loves this building. It's fully occupied. They said, okay, you guys know what you're doing, and no, we'll keep the money. And we've done many projects with this client since. But even something as technical as underhanging brick. Okay, so I've done several projects where we propose it, and we could go back, I guess, quickly. We're doing okay on time? I'll just let it play again. So there's been many projects where we want to do underhanging brick, and it often gets value engineered out, as they say. It's too expensive, you can't do it, and so there's a whole host of code issues about that. So obviously you can't just adhere brick with mortar on an underside condition, it'll eventually fall. And then you can either have it prefab panels, where it's like thin brick that doesn't match the brick, but we didn't want any of that. And so we found was that no project in New York has ever done this, that we talked to all these professionals. And so we said, there's gotta be a way, and so this company in the UK, no one would do it here. They agreed we shipped them our brick, they cut it, and they put it into their special, dovetail clip system and shipped it back. And so we ended up actually integrating our brick on that big underhang and all these slope conditions. So I've found that those things interest me and are fun wins, and that I always said that, give me a 5-acre parcel in Ohio. I'm not Frank Gehry. I'm probably not going to come up with that incredible thing, but given all of these constraints and considerations and complexities, I think I do pretty good, and we have fun doing it. So In closing, just want to say, I think I covered everything. Pretty much, missed a couple of things, but that's fine. So in closing, I just want to say that I had a fun time tripping through life, I would say, just so busy. I worked 2 jobs while I always was working, and didn't take a year to get my license. I just didn't sleep for a while and all that. So I pushed myself very hard. And so you should do that while you have the energy and ability to do so. And just say yes, as was said, push yourselves. You never know what your ceiling is, and you can continually break through it, and it's a pretty good feeling to really see what you're made out of. And hard work pays off. So tell my students all the time, just go for it and work hard and show up, and ultimately you'll find what you want to do and find success and hopefully happiness. So thank you very much.
Thank you all for insightful presentations. It's very interesting that you all brought coats, and just so you guys know, I didn't ask for coats. So it's really interesting to see that all of you guys have brought coats. And I think part of that is you were trying to help, because a lot of students are not certain with their paths and career, and then you guys are role models for them. And I've met a lot of students in the hallway, and also in my class there are a lot of students who know you and who took your classes, and they all said really good things about you. They look up to you, and then a lot of them actually showed up tonight, so it really means a lot for them. And a lot of things that you say have more weight for the students, so I appreciate sharing them with the students. And I was trying to grasp onto the differences and similarities of your career paths, but honestly, I don't have any answers for that. But that said, I think we all have different paths, and then whenever I talk to any early to mid-career architects or established architects, they all say the same thing. They just took their own paths and then deviated a lot, but we just share the trend of towards the architecture profession. So it was really good to see those. So I'll ask you guys a couple of questions and then open it up to the floor. So the first question is, looking back at your time at City Tech, what course or experience turned out to be the most influential in your career, and that's more City Tech specific? Because a lot of students actually wonder what courses they should take, what they should do next semester. So we'd like to hear your advice on that.
Sure. I'll take it. Yeah, influential people, definitely it's great to see Robert Zagaroli, Ken, and others. It's the people, and that's mainly why I teach, is because I know how much it influenced me to have great professors, and I would not be where I am without that. Specifically, the classes, public speaking was very helpful, actually. That was a good one. And philosophy of technology was a great elective that really opened my mind to a lot of things. Yeah, so I don't know, other than the obvious critical design classes.
So I mean, for me, that's kind of a tough one. So I was here for 1 year, so it was a short period of time, but it was effective because it was my first sort of real experience with architecture, and so for me, it was more about the projects we did and the ways in which you work as an architect and as a student in architecture that I think was really great to see for the first time. So one was the kind of studio culture, like the fact that you're working with people doing the same thing, the students that or the peers that you're with, was exciting for me. One specific thing was doing my first precedent study was kind of great. And it was a house by Bruce Goff. It was a very interesting architect. And so realizing that learning about architecture or learning in school is not really just sort of reading in a book, but rather looking at specific projects and trying to decipher what somebody was doing in that project. And I think that sort of opened my eyes in the sense of like everything, or you can learn in a variety of ways as an architect, and I think that was sort of exciting for me to realize that for the first time.
I think what was interesting when I was here, and I figured that out later on, was that the school gave me a good foundation in terms of how materials came together, I think, building systems and assemblies. Even if I was just here for 2 years, I think that was the thing that I feel like I learned the most or got out of this. I remember a class, if you haven't taken Paul King, I remember a class that he took, you should take him. He had us do an assignment where we had to go to the train platforms that go into the MTA and pick something in the MTA rail system and draw it in a way where you can draw how you think it comes together. And I remember drawing like the railing where the train tracks are, and I didn't know how it came together, but I tried to draw it, and I remember that being really interesting. But I actually do that all the time now. When you go out to surveys or survey a building, or you try to just sort of figure out how something works on existing conditions or something like that, it's sort of a good thing to know how to look at something and try to figure out how it works, even if you're not totally sure. But I think that was like a specific exercise, I think, that I remember sort of coming back again while I was practicing.
Thank you. I was going to ask you another question about the degree programs, MArch, BArch, VTech, but I'm going to go for a more provocative one. So every architect has a crisis story where they question their decisions. What was yours, and how did you overcome it?
I guess I can go. I feel like I have many, so I'm just going to pick one. So I think it was interesting when Justin talked about waiting intentionally to go into grad school. I went straight to grad school right after graduating from my BArch, and that was a big mistake. I ended up, going to grad school and being one of the youngest people there. Everyone else was sort of much older than me by a few years. But I realized that I wasn't mature enough to really absorb the things that grad school had to offer, and so I didn't really take full advantage of that. And I remember professors told me, don't do it. Like, wait at least a year, go out and work, do something, travel, come back, and then go to grad school. But I didn't listen, and I realized later on that the issue with that was that I wasn't mature enough to absorb the information. And the way that I kind of think about undergrad and grad school is that undergrad, really, when you graduate from that degree, you learn a lot of things, but by the time you're out of there, truly the one thing that you kind of know how to do is plan section and elevation. Everything else you just sort of dabbled with, and you're not really that great at it yet. You don't know enough about it. So it's about the how. It's like how to do a plan section and elevation, or how to think three-dimensionally. And then grad school, I always thought about as something where it's about the why, and it's more about why are you doing these things, and that requires a certain amount of maturity. I think you have to live a little in order to be able to absorb that information. So I think that was one of my sort of hurdles that I had to go through.
Yeah, I too have a few. I mean, I kind of, I'm not, yeah, never mind. I do have a few. One super specific one is pertaining to the countryside film that we did. I just broken down RV without running brakes in the middle of like Texas with nowhere to go, and stuck there for like 3 days, and Googling away at people who are willing to fix it, finding a guy on Craigslist to help fix it, and thinking that this might be how I die, and then he actually fixes it, which was kind of incredible. So that's one quick one. A fire in another project I did that was started, where you go full panic mode and think everything's gonna collapse and you might have done something wrong, etc. So you just freak out. Thankfully, small fire got put out. Everything was fine. Yeah, plenty of like examples like that. I don't know that I've ever had though sort of an existential like, did I pick the right career, that kind of thing. A part of it for me has been like, it's a series of these crises, and I feel like it's gonna happen regardless in life. And I've always just been interested in solving the problems of the crises, and I think that's kind of what kept me going, in a way, you know.
Yeah, I think we can all share the same joke of which one do we pick. But for me, I always wanted to do many things, and so I was constantly questioning, do I want to do this or start something else? Do I want to go to medical school still, or this and that? And for me, at a certain point, I guess, mid-30s, I just said, I accept. For this life, my life is buildings. And even if I go more into development or anything, it's like, this is my passion, and I love it. So it's sort of getting to a certain age of letting go, and so I just stopped waking up and saying, maybe I'm going to another grad school, and I say, no more school, you know, so that helped. But a crisis point for sure was just, you know, burnout is a real thing. I see it sometimes in my students, that they're in a personal crisis, maybe things are going on at home, or they're working 2 jobs, and it can be, it's a real thing, and I really, some of it was self-inflicted, like I put myself probably through more than I should have in terms of taking on obligations. But yeah, that I got to a point of real burnout where I felt like I had to almost walk away and take a huge break. But luckily I had a lot of support and ability to just step back. Actually, it was odd enough, it was actually right before the pandemic, where I think 2 months before, I said, why can't the world just stop so that I can get a breath? And then the world stopped. So.
Thanks for that.
Great, thank you. So I'll open it up to the floor. So anyone who's interested in asking questions to the speakers, you can raise your hand. We'll pass on the mic. Any questions?
No questions.
Cool. We covered it all.
I covered it. There's a question right here.
Right here.
There's one at the front.
We should maybe cover the AI topic, huh?
Oh, yeah, I can ask.
Maybe someone will ask.
Have you ever considered moving to a different country to be an architect, and if so, where?
It's interesting that you asked that question, because I was actually just thinking about that a couple weeks ago. I'm actually currently doing a project for my mother's house in Ecuador, and I realized there's so much freedom over there to just kind of do whatever you want formally and experiment with things, and it's like dirt cheap. And I'm just like sort of kind of thinking twice about where I am at right now, because it's so difficult to just do something slightly interesting here with all the requirements and everyone being afraid of taking on the risk of something that isn't standard. And I realized that doing some work here over in Ecuador, the freedom was just so relieving, and allowing myself to kind of express, and it's not just to make things just to make things funky. It's like there are very specific reasons why we do certain things, but the requirements here just they don't see that. They're actually very functional things, and so I don't know. I'm just like, maybe I should go over there and practice. But so I don't know, but I just find it interesting that you asked that question, and I think if you are someone who has the ability to go back and forth from different places, I am lucky that I have that ability to go from here to South America. Try it. See if you can experiment with something, and see what comes out of it.
Yeah, interesting. I've had a lot of new changes. Finally got married. My wife's Brazilian, so I love it in Brazil, and I've thought about some next phase of life there, perhaps. I spoke with some architecture firms there, but I gotta learn Portuguese first. So. But yeah, it's to Chris's point. There's so much restriction here because of code, zoning, cost, everything. It's hard to be creative and playful, and that definitely sometimes seems easier abroad. And in terms of, I always had a dream to build my dream house, when that's probably most likely in Brazil too. So we'll see.
From upstate to Brazil.
You need. Oh, I can. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'd be open to it. Either for I don't know for how long, or maybe for a temporary amount of time, etc. Definitely would love to do projects outside of New York. Yeah, I would absolutely. I mean, I'm hoping to do some projects in Montenegro, which is where I'm from. So that would be awesome. My wife's from Mexico, so I'd love to do work there as well. As far as going to live, sure, some period of time I'd be open to it. Yeah, I think it'd be exciting. Yeah, and I second the comments about a little bit more freedom. You probably get paid less, but you get to do maybe more creative projects and maybe more fun projects that actually are more likely to get built because of the cost of everything. So, yeah, and absolutely, if you have an opportunity to do it, I would do it. Yeah.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? No. We're opening up.
From 0 to 4. You gotta raise your hands again. He didn't. Oh yeah. Okay.
After multiple years working in different firms and with different people, have you ever developed any big no's that come with just your general workflow when it comes to projects?
Big nose?
Big nose.
Like don't do's?
I mean, there's definitely like project types I would not want to do. I mean, yeah, anything with prisons or jails or those kinds of buildings, I think would not be something I'd be up for. I think there's definitely also like questions about working hours and sort of overload of work, especially for young architects in firms. I think it's getting better over time, but it's still for sure a problem. So I think you sort of have to put your foot down in some cases. Is that kind of in line with what you're asking? Yeah, that's my two. I don't know. Probably might have more, but
I'll think about it.
I was trying to think as well. You said I'm sorry. You said workflow no's.
Any big no's.
Any big no's.
In
I heard the word.
workflow
I
work,
heard
I
the word
guess.
workflow, and
Yeah.
I started thinking about that. I think. I guess. I think I'm going through something like right now. Starting now that I started at a new firm, there's a lot of young people there, and very recent grads. Like some of them just graduated like last June, and there is a sort of dynamic where you have to have a workflow, for the project where there's a line of communication where how the kind of project develops and evolves, and so a bunch of kids just coming in and sort of starting to work on the project. I think a big no with that is just that, kind of letting them take control of the kind of the digital aspects of it, because they just don't know enough. But then there's this whole dynamic where there's older people there that just don't know enough about how to control that stuff, and so having someone just come in and start working on the project is a big no for me. I think there's a big kind of training aspect that needs to go in before someone actually touches the project. I mean, so many times I see recent grads coming in and they don't know how to use layers, for example, and they just make a mess of the whole project. And it falls on other people and creates these, as I'm thinking about workflows, these very horrific workflows. And that's a big no. In terms of like types of projects, like if I were to work on not work on a project, I don't really think there is one, except for the whole jail thing. But it is an interesting program. I think it's still building, and it needs to get thought about and changed maybe, and maybe rethought. So I think there's opportunity everywhere, but that's all I can think of right now.
You gave me time to think something. Yeah, the no's. One is don't attach your ego to a project. Know what the client is really looking for, and don't take it as an opportunity to, this is my, dream and this and that. It can lead to trouble. More often than not, if you're misaligned with the real client's visions, cost constraints, everything, it's just gonna cause headaches and redesign and value engineering later on. So upfront, know the goals and accept that not everything is a dream project. As was mentioned, a lot of things are sort of the bread and butter projects. Every firm has them. It's not everything's exciting. So save your passion and your ego for the real opportunities and don't force it. And then in terms of workflow, we debate it all the time. Like, do we have one team really take a project from start to finish? Or what happens if the one team member doesn't really have CA experience and doesn't know how to review shop drawings? Do they learn? Do they make mistakes? Or do you have the separate CA people that are only doing that? And so that's a constant, I guess that addresses a workflow issue. So we try to have the workflow be start to finish, but people also have to adapt and jump to different teams and put out different fires, but that's what I got for now.
Thank you. I know there are a few other people who had questions, but let me intercept and then maybe ask one question to the panelists and then return it to the audience. So today's students are entering a profession being transformed by AI. How are you each using AI or thinking about AI in your current practice or teaching? And I think this might be relevant to the professional audience too. Let's go first.
I want to be optimistic about it, essentially. I definitely use it in my kind of everyday life in general. So use obviously ChatGPT, those kinds of things. Some of the images that I showed for a couple of the projects were not entirely done with AI, but may have been enhanced after I completed a rendering and then enhanced it with AI, added things to it, etc. I was listening recently to an interview with Jensen, I forget his last name. He's the
Huang.
Huang, right? Yeah. So he was talking about it and brought up one anecdote of that there was a theory that all radiologists would become obsolete in 5 years because of the use of AI, because it can look at scans for them essentially. And so what really happened is essentially all radiologists started using the technology, but actually more radiologists were needed over those 5 years. So in a way, it's I do think it's a tool. I do think some architects will lose their jobs. I do think it's going to affect our profession, absolutely. But I see it more so as it's not replacing, if I use a radiologist, it's not replacing the radiologist, it's replacing the task of looking at the scan, but you still need somebody to interpret it, you still need somebody to kind of tell you certain things. I think about sort of day-to-day workload that I have, 99% of it AI right now can't do, because I have to speak to a client, explain to them certain things, draw specific things, every single project is different, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it'll definitely affect us, but I'm sort of trying to be on the optimistic side of it, basically. And I'm definitely going to use it. By all means, any tool that makes my life a little better is good.
Yeah, I totally agree. This was actually one of my slides, so I actually have a lot of thoughts on it that I didn't get to. So I actually asked my students recently, are they worried about AI? And I was surprised that most of them said, no, not really. So I felt that there might be a lot of angst around it, but I was glad to see that they're just, no, keep learning, and it's a tool and this and that. So I would encourage you to, not be worried about it, just adapt and embrace it. I went to a couple conferences about this, and a simple story someone said was, there's been various points where huge technological leaps happened, like farmers, for example. At some point, tractors came along, and they thought, all farmers will be out of business. But it really just came down to the farmers who bought tractors. They adapted and were that much more productive, and then grew their businesses. And so there's always going to be that concern, but those who adapt and use it will, I think, remain successful. Yes, actually a big topic here. So we use it, and it's probably most beneficial for image generation, right? So renderings, animations, all these things are unbelievable. And my concern is that a lot of students get their foot in the door with these kind of skills, because you're not that knowledgeable maybe to design or to be advanced Revit folks, although we train you well with the Revit. But that's my concern, that a lot of those opportunities for young professionals may go away, because as you said, the complexity of it is that I feel not worried at all for my position and my career, and as long as I want to work, I'm not worried. Maybe 5-10 years, but it's so complicated what we do that the tools aren't there yet. There's specific things like Finch, which was an SD software for planning, which is pretty amazing. We use it. You can load in your drawings. It'll recognize the way you do layouts, and then you can plug in like unit breakdown percentages, like 1, 2, 3 bedroom studios, specific core accessibility requirements, all these things, and it actually will spit out within seconds and minutes different floor plan options. But it's still faster for us to do it just on a sketch and then right into Revit. And so I think all of these things will come, and it'll revolutionize everything, but it's happened almost every decade or two, right? Drafting boards, AutoCAD, Revit. This is a huge leap, and will, transform things more than maybe these other times. But trying to be optimistic, I think. And then on the bigger note, who knows? Maybe it gets to the point where there's a huge renaissance in society where people don't have to work, and we can actually just sit around and discuss architecture and have fun with it. So we'll see.
I think artificial intelligence is pretty interesting. The you know, it's kind of weird you think about it. It's like somewhere in the United States, there's like some place where these precious metals are being burned with information for a recipe that you've like wanted to do for quiche or something, and like it's weird how it all kind of works. But I think the thing about architecture is that it's sort of a really primitive act. It's you know, you're still digging a hole in the ground to put something on the ground, and you're interacting with the earth, and so that's like super mega primitive. That's like as primitive as civilizations from Mesopotamia, and what I find kind of interesting is you know, is to just think about, well, how will AI affect that, and I'm not sure if it will. It'd be interesting if it does. But I think it's still in this kind of place of data collecting, and on top of data collecting and regurgitation of the internet, and kind of informing us and reinforming us in these sort of strange ways. But I think you still have to put a shovel in the ground, and I'm more interested in seeing how AI is going to create tools for building as opposed to imagery and text and data collecting, and I think it will reach that point at some point, and I'm kind of looking forward to that. The way that we've used AI, I'm talking like sort of recently, is just really for meeting minutes, and it hasn't gone more than that.
It's pretty great for that.
And sort of saving time, doing sort of repetitive tasks and things like that. But I think until it actually can help us put buildings into the ground in some sort of physical way, it's not that interesting yet. But I'm sure it'll get there at some point.
So we're going over time a bit, so maybe we'll have one more question from the audience and then conclude today's lecture. Was there someone who raised their hand? Do you want to?
My question is related to the first question that was asked, but as someone who is trying to work professionally as quick as possible, I don't want to be stuck just working in New York. And what is the process like of being able to work abroad while only having a 4-year degree? And would I have to like be able to further my career to be able to do that?
That's a good question. I mean, I guess it depends on what you mean by work abroad. Like, do you mean starting your own practice elsewhere? Do you mean working for a company abroad? Because my advice would be find a international architecture firm that has offices in different parts of the world that you are interested in, and try and use that as a way in to both obviously get employed, but then also to have the opportunity to move elsewhere within that company. That sort of seems to me like maybe the quickest and kind of easiest way to get that experience, I would say.
Josh, we can continue later in class. We're going to go up to class in a little bit. I would say it's kind of like if you if you make it in New York, make it anywhere. I guess it's very strict here. There's a lot of, to get licensed in New York is one of the hardest places, in terms of it's recognized everywhere. So licensing, I think, as long as you're licensed here, it's well recognized globally. And if you learn the complexities here, it's generally simpler elsewhere. Like if you're technically interested in zoning, right? New York zoning is probably the craziest out of anywhere in the world. Building codes, all these things. the complexity of thinking about construction sequencing and how to build in tiny little back alleys and all these things. So I think you learn here and you get, you know, degrees and license, then it's pretty easy to go elsewhere. But I agree, try to learn from folks, talk to people. I think that's one thing that I had written down here somewhere. Just when I was a student, I was constantly picking brains, professors, following them down the elevator, go to office hours, hey, can I ask you this? Learn from others' mistakes and experience. It'll save you a lot of effort, and talk to people. Most people are very willing to take time for young students to try to give them advice.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think just try to meet as many people as you possibly can, and that'll lead to different opportunities. If you're thinking of a specific place to go to, I don't know, work a little bit, buy a ticket, go there, and go to your favorite architecture firm there and see if you can get a job. So yeah, I think just expose yourself is the biggest thing. Put yourself in a position where others can see you.
Just one more quick thing to add. I find that, you know, sometimes students graduate, and I'm impressed with some people's egos. Like, I'm gonna now start my firm and I'm gonna do this, and it's great, but you have to make sure that you learn design skills, right? School is one thing, but you really wanna work under established great architects, and you can learn so much so quickly. But you know, even if you want to just go abroad and work on single-family homes, there's a lot of knowledge and skill that is developed on just putting together simple spaces and all these things. So try to, if you want to go out on your own and do simpler things elsewhere, just make sure you get that core great experience under a great architect.
While it is very fun and insightful to hear your opinions about architecture and career, we're over 8, so I'd like to end the lecture here tonight. I think they might be able to linger a little bit more if you have any more questions, so please come up forward. But thank you so much to the speakers, Christian, Justin, Demir, so let's give a big hand to the speakers. And thank you everyone for joining this lecture in person and online. This was the final lecture of the semester, and we will return with a full new list of spring lineup pretty soon. So stay tuned. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you, Eugene.
Thank you, thanks.
Let me actually come around.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Good to know you.
You too, you too. You have class now?
Yeah, it's at 6. So.